Hey Loomers, welcome to another episode of Agency World. In this video, I'm going to take you guys through how we manage freelancers and what we did to pretty much scale Relume. So in our early days of Relume, as you guys have probably seen from our other videos, it was mostly Adam and I running the agency in terms of me being on sales and Adam being on design and development. But as you know, you want to grow a business. So this was the approach that we took, and this is what we saw as the insights that we think would be beneficial for any other agency or any other individuals looking to scale their agency. So the goals for this video will be pretty much to kind of take you through the benefits of scaling your agency with the freelancers rather than full-time employees. Obviously, there's the pros and cons of each, but I think we TLDR, we settled on freelancers rather than hiring full-time employees, and I'll tell you why. Also going to take you through how we pretty much managed freelancers and what we called the Relume roster. So essentially that was the model of how we engage with freelancers and also how we sold this to clients or how we work with clients. So it's super important for us to kind of make that clear and transparent. And also want to take you through the process of how we close projects with clients, sign a freelancer, connect clients with the freelancer using Slack, and how we shared our revenue. So bit of a process overview, and then also how we manage all these projects at once. And I guess spoiler alert, it's not that crazy. I use Google Sheets, and it's crazy to see how much value I got from just using something like Google Sheets. And I think you'd be surprised to see how simple it is. And as you've probably seen from all my videos, I do love simple. Simple is always best. And last but not least, where to find the best freelancers to work with and how to test them. So the benefits of working with freelancers versus full-time. Now, a lot of these things are obvious. Variable costs reduce your ongoing. So yes, like I said, it's obvious, but it's easier said than done in the sense of we had the chance to test with full-time, and it was something that we didn't kind of like. And the reason why, I guess I'll start with the cons of full-time. Your ongoing costs do go up. Yeah, you might get more consistency, obviously, with output and in terms of the designer who will be working on a project. But what we found was that in order to scale that, you need a lot of upfront money without that much return. And what that ends up creating, let's say you're getting two designers, let's example 5K each, and then all of a sudden your burn rate now goes up to 10K a month. It creates this extra pressure to always have to generate that 10K, which at the early stages, from going from 2 employees to become larger, that's where I see it wasn't worth it. Now I'm not at that point where we were with 10 full-timers, and I know it probably does work for other agencies, but this is what just worked for us because it was the easiest to turn on with just 2 people. So yeah, as a smaller agency, as you saw from our revenue in the previous video, our revenue wasn't consistent enough for us to be able to commit to an ongoing, to a fixed ongoing. So the variable cost element just really allowed us to work on a per project basis and not have to stress if we didn't make money. Also, pretty much, I think also negates the full-time aspect is that you get access to more talent over multiple time zones. So one of the blockers for us, it wasn't a blocker, one thing to help me close projects was the ability for me to sell in a freelancer who was on that time zone. So whether or not it was in the US or Europe, I had both time zones covered, which allowed us to be flexible with the client and close something because I'm like, oh, you know what? I like the fact that they're in Europe, so I want to work with you guys. So I was able to kind of juggle different freelancers to be able to cope with the time zones, but also talent. I'm not saying one person is good enough, but you are capped to the ability of that one full-timer. So I feel like getting access to a really talented pool of freelancers really levels up your design game and variability. So you're able to kind of touch on different projects. So this is, again, super important. Clients' needs. Hey, I need to be taking on this design direction. Hey, I just need a snappy Webflow development. Just smash it out. Don't care about design, or they obviously care about design because they're a very designer, but they just want someone to be a world-class web developer. So we were lucky enough to have that range of incredible designers, incredible pure Webflow devs, and also incredible Webflow developers and designers who could do the full stack. So that talent part, again, allowed me to close more. It was a less of a barrier and less of a blocker for me to close that project because I knew I had that talent pool and was able to take on that project. And I was able to allocate that person in the back of my mind whilst doing the sales call, knowing, that person be perfect for that. So it was an easy way for me to pretty much to sell. And most importantly, to scale up and down depending on demand. So if nothing comes in, all good. We're not going to freak out. And then obviously, if we get another 10 projects, I can scale up. I could take on 10 projects. So I never had that issue of, sorry, we're full capacity. I know some other agencies can get to that point when they've got a team, but by having that firepower underneath what I call the Realum roster, having that Realum roster, I was able to close everything in anything, and I loved it. So what was the Relume roster model? It was really simple. The only distinct difference between a standard outsourcing play was that we closed the project first. Now, yes, there's a lot more heavy lifting in obviously doing more sales and standardizing the briefs, but what this enabled us to do was get more people interested, because there are a lot of platforms that say, hey, projects, and then obviously it's 1,000 people in this thing and one lead comes in. Whereas we closed the project. We said, this is the client, 20 grand. And it's either yes or no. There was no negotiation on whether or not, well, they didn't have to negotiate with the client, which is a big element. So we pretty much outsourced sales for the roster. So why that's important as well is that it just enabled them to focus on nailing the project. So we had it all covered from a closing point of view. So we were able to take on that project, take the client through all that process, and then enable them to just focus on delivering. So I think that was obviously the most distinct difference between the two. And the best part about this as well is that if they were interested, they just messaged me. So there was no commitment to be part of the roster. And why this is important, because again, getting more talent pool, which pulls into the last point I was saying before, I can close more. So the better my talent pool, because of how seamless the process is, yes or no commitment style, I was able to get better talent. And then overall that loop continued, that I was able to close better clients and better projects. So I have the best because I believe had the best talent. So if they were interested, they would just DM me saying, yep, keen. And then I would then pass on the project. Now, if there was, let's say 3 or 4 people going for the project, that's when I would lean back into the client. So again, I wouldn't do it on a per price saying, let's negotiate, take it down to 5. I would then lean into the projects that the people in the roster did. I would share 4 of those projects, like their portfolios, and then I would say, hey, what do you think from our team? And let them pick. And also time zones did filter out a lot of people. So usually it would be 4 people keen, but only 2 would match due to the time zone. So then the freelancer would take it from 0 to 1. So I got the lead, I closed it, and then I would post it in Slack saying, hey, who's interested? Once the freelancer accepted that, that's it. It becomes their project. They're under the Relume banner. It's a Relume project with the Relume email. They manage this all within Slack. And then they take it from 0 to 1, which was what I was able to do, which I think was a lot different to, again, a lot of outsourcing models, that they not only were able to own the project, but they also did management. So they managed the actual project from 0 to 1, which enabled me to go harder and focus on sales. Like I just went out there and smashed as much sales and closed as many deals as I could, because I knew I could feed it into this engine, and it was literally just a post in Slack. Obviously standardized the brief, so I closed it, standardized the brief, posted in Slack, and then that loop was pretty automated. So that is pretty much the roster model of how it worked, and how the project breakdowns worked over time. So initially, what we're working on, like the margins are tight, so that's why you have to push harder for higher value projects, because as you can see, this is where it gets really interesting. So 10 grand project, man, I'm going to close a 10K project. What ends up happening? So we took a 65-35 on average split based on the fact that we were closing. That's why the split was higher. So in this instance, 10 grand sounds awesome, right? But when you actually break it down, after we got our clip back, so the freelancer obviously made 6.5K from that. Relume made 3.5K. Then up front, we made 1.75K. So it's not a huge amount of cash if you've got, like, you want to grow and obviously get a lot of money. Obviously, yeah, times 5, yeah, you start to make some cash. But you can see though, that's why it's super important to be able to churn through these projects and get them done, because on average we're doing, let's say on 2 months, let's say a 40K project, we got better, it could be 2 to 3 months, but still I found even if it was 10 versus 40, always around the 2 to 3 month mark. So the point I'm trying to make is that focusing on higher value obviously helps you in the longer run. So you can see when we started to close 40K projects, this is when this roster model started to actually pump cash for us. So it's slim margins at the start, but if you stick with it and you're able to close, 3 to 4 projects of these monthly, it starts to stack up, and then start to focus on obviously pushing up that value, right, over time. And obviously that comes through portfolio, that comes through delivering. But what is awesome about the roster model is that you're able, obviously pending on the approval of the people in your roster, you're able to leverage their portfolio as your portfolio. So when you're starting with nothing, this is important, right? Because it's a nice little hack here. Everything is about your portfolio, but if you're able to create this network, you can lean into their projects that become your portfolio when you sell. So then all of a sudden, instead of having 2 projects in your portfolio, you've got 5 people in your roster, and they've got 3 websites each. You've got 15 websites in your portfolio, and then you can leverage those to push it up more to the 40K projects. But yeah, this is overall tight at the start in terms of, like, if you want to adopt this model, but over time, as you pull up that average value, you start to make some good cash. So next is the roster model. So the crucial part of this is you need to make sure you standardize your briefs. Where it can blow up is scope creep and not being aligned with the roster on the project. Hence the reason why I adopted price per page. Then I started to standardize the deliverables in the sense of UX, UI, Webflow development, creating assets. So not only was it per page, but I also standardized any extra deliverables on top of that page. So everyone was across, everyone knew exactly what needed to be done, and everyone knew exactly what their margins would be taking on the project. So the biggest challenge of the close roster model, close a project first, pass on, is that you need to know that it's valuable when it's posted into the Slack group. So you need to know that they're able to look at that brief and understand that they are going to make money based off the brief. And sometimes a simpler is better, but more direct and more precise helps everyone stay aligned as to what needs to be done. And then obviously summarizing all those in a statement of works for the client to sign. So this is which I'll share with you guys as well. So this is a standard template brief that I would post into the roster. And essentially I'd be breaking down project name, industry, value, the type of project that we'd be doing, additional requirements, breakdown. So I had a breakdown of pages in a Google Sheet and also a Loom video. So I would do a Loom to summarize the overall call that I had with the client, as well as any other additional information, and then anything else that the client provided with us from a brief point of view. Examples of websites they like from a design direction if they're going down the design path, deadline, start date, and the location. So that's pretty much an example brief that would do. And this is how we would actually post this in our Slack. So as you can see, pretty straightforward, right? I'd post this into projects one. Once it got approved, or once someone from the roster wanted to do it, they'll DM me. Again, 3 to 4 DMs. We align with the client who they best want to work with, and then this project gets closed. And then this is when I then create a channel inside of Slack to then connect the client with our roster. In this case, we had two people in our roster work together on this one, and then they kickstarted the project. And I was hands off after that. That's the beauty of the roster model, that you're able to be hands off because you've passed on that lead essentially to that freelancer under your company name still. So yeah, this obviously allows you to focus on other things, and allowed us to build better sales funnels, and also just allowed me to focus on just closing. So that's when we get them onboarded. And then this is how we would manage projects. So again, simple stack, communication all through Slack, had a project hub in Notion, and also had cash flow managing Google Sheets. So let me take you through the Google Sheets model. And it really was as simple as this. I would essentially note down all the projects that we needed to get done. I would then get a defined project value and put in the costs, who was on it from the roster point of view. So then I could then start understanding what my average margins were per project, which ended up being 37.5, and as well as the profit I would make for each project, the status, staging, and if it was finished. So this was pretty much everything that I knew. This would be where I knew I had to pay the freelancer. Once something was paid, I would then essentially just mark it as paid. Total remaining was 3,489. So I'll fix that out. But I would essentially just note the amount paid here, which would take this to 0, meaning I've got nothing remaining. So that's essentially how I'd manage every single, all the projects. And what this would have been, and this is an example of real projects, this would have been 21 projects that we had probably running over 2 to 3 months. So that would be essentially how we've had all the projects stacked, full visibility. And then this was my accounts receivable section. So I had a simple thing remaining. This is the amount that I knew that was needed, that I had to collect, and whether or not it was based off us not finishing a project, or if it was based off the fact that I sent an invoice. So it was 2 elements, but this was a really crucial number for me, because if I had total owing 112K and remaining 98K and only 13K paid, this is just an example here, but just to give you an overview, I knew something had to be done here. So it was a simple way for me to just quickly measure, okay, cool. Do I need to send out more invoices? Do I need to follow up a project here that's in progress to see what the status is? Because then I was able to really get a quick measure of, man, I've got 100K coming in. And if I get that invoice paid, get that project done, I'm going to start pushing down I'm going to start pushing up the total paid, which means we're collecting money. Because at the end of the day, this is your health. This is the health of the agency. And if you don't get this right, this is where things start to get out of control, get out of hand. And that's why you've got to obviously have a good tight deadline on projects that need to be finished with the guys in your roster, but also have a good accounts follow-up. So this is where you obviously can use multiple management tools to follow up invoices, but I use a traditional method, and that was creating an alias called Sarah. So if I had a project that I needed to get paid on, and it was, let's say, a week or 2 weeks not paid, I would use our alias Sarah to follow up, but ruthlessly follow up. And that person would continuously follow up until we got paid. It just helped me separate Dan, the salesman, from, hey, pay me my money. And I think it would allow me to maintain good relationships with the clients with ongoing work without having to be too direct with them. And I use that other persona to be direct. So I was able to maintain and what I call keep face and be a charismatic salesperson. And then the other person was direct. Sarah did not care. She was ruthless. She attacked and made sure that we got paid. So it was a good way to maintain good relationships for ongoing work. So that's pretty much how we manage our cash flow. Again, I'll link this into the description as well if you guys want to play around, make it better. I think there's a lot of things you can improve on this, to be honest, and it's not necessarily the best way in my opinion, but I think it did an awesome job for me managing a lot of value, a lot of projects, and if it worked for me, I'm sure it can work for a lot of people. So that's essentially the cash flow part of how we manage all our projects. And I've created another video before, but essentially this is how we managed our projects with the client. So Project Hub, nice little Notion logo, double Notion. So once a client got onboarded, the freelancer would then create a new project hub, which would then have all the tickets and everything managed there. So again, if I needed to dive deeper into the project to understand what needed or what was not getting done, I was then able to dive deeper into this one as well. So I've created another video to explain how we did this in depth, but yeah, essentially we manage all the tickets through Notion. So really I had an easy view, whether or not I had my Google Sheet, Project Hub, I had a quick way of understanding the status, financial status of where everything was at in the sense of payments, owed, projects that are done, projects that are finished, projects that are about to be finished. And then also I had a good understanding of like, oh, cool, why if a project isn't finished, I could dig deep into this Project Hub. But I didn't necessarily have to go into so much detail. I kept it very top level, which allowed me to just focus on closing more and more projects and then just using my simple methods of cash in, cash out to understand if things were moving along. And that really is how we're able to manage so many projects and still generate good revenue. And last but not least, this is how we were finding freelancers. So, and how we used to test them. So in terms of finding, it wasn't genius. Like we just scoured all of Made in Webflow, which was Webflow Showcase. So we would look at all the freelancers on Showcase, Experts, Slack, and Twitter, and then get on a call. Because the first way you can determine if someone is going to be good is, do you get along with them personally? Are they someone you can see yourself? Are they someone that you believe could represent your company on a call with a client? So that's how I used to vet people first off. So if they didn't pass that test, obviously they have to have good design portfolios first. I get on a call with them. Let's see if I get along. They're good people. If they tick those boxes from a design point of view, good person point of view, then what I would do, pending obviously they want to join the roster, sometimes it's always obviously a no-brainer because there's no commitment, I would then start them with smaller projects. So you give them like a 5K project, 4K project, whatever you determine as a small value. Work with them on a smaller value project, and or if you don't have a smaller value project, I would then give them a smaller deliverable. So let's say I had a full design and development project. I will just give them the development part, or I'll give them just the design part. So just chunk up the deliverables. And that way we're able to test and work with a lot of freelancers and see if whether or not they were capable of joining the roster full time. So yeah, that's how we did it. That's how we scaled our projects at Relume. We built the Relume roster, and that was enabled us to really focus on developing tools, allowed us to focus on creating content, and just to really have a great macro perspective of the company. And when we're able to have a good macro perspective, we're able to make better decisions, and we'll be able to get better growth, able to work with better talent, and also just enabled us to think clear, because we weren't always in the weeds of projects. That's why I really like the roster model. It allowed us to not be in the weeds and focus more on the business rather than being in the business. And that's obviously that's a classic 101, but this actually enabled us to do that, because it's all good in theory. Really, you don't need to watch this video to understand. You get a project, subcontract it out, you make that margin. But with the roster model, how we did it in terms of closing projects first, standardizing briefs, and then pass on, it just was a small little twist, but enabled us to get a lot more scale. So that's how we approached it, and I hope you found this useful. And let me know in the comments what other type of videos or insights you'd like to learn from agency building. Thanks, Loomers. Take care.